After suffering through hundreds of years of the Dark Ages, European nations began to re-establish themselves in the 1500s. People began to look to both science and religion instead of local superstition to help them understand their daily lives. Many felt that science could explain the mysteries of the natural world. They believed humans should study the sun and stars, the animals and plants world, and even the human body to figure out how things really worked. These early scientists realized that what had been labeled as magic could be explained through reasons and methodical observation. They started exploring chemistry, physics, anatomy, and astronomy. Nonetheless, religion was still a more important part of people's lives than science, and many religious leaders of that time didn't like science, believing that scientists were trying to ruin religion and take away the role of priests in society. To stop them, to stop scientists and others who didn't follow its teaching, the church began inquisitions. These inquisitions were periods of time when the Pope and his priests ordered that anyone who did not practice religion the way that the Church demanded should be imprisoned, tortured, or executed. While Inquisition spread throughout Europe, England continued its witch hunts. People were accused of practicing magic and were then convicted of befriending and worshipping the devil. In 1584, a man named Reginald Stott published a book called The Discovery of Witchcraft. Stott was appalled by the witch hunts and angry that innocent people who practiced magic were thrown in jail or executed. Stott knew they were being persecuted wrongly because he understood the magic was based on nothing more than tricks. In his books, he stated that there were no such thing as witches and wizards, and no one on earth had the power to control nature or change the things God had made. Stott argued that the ability to create illusions or perform sleight of hand tricks were nothing more than an entertainment skill, and everyone could benefit from a little entertainment. To prove witches didn't have mysterious powers, Stott explained how many magical tricks were performed. He described in great detail some of the most impressive feats of the times, like swallowing knives and passing coins through solid objects. He even included an illusion to show how the decapitation trick was made famous by Deadeye worked. His hope was if people understood that magic was harmless fun, the witch hunts would stop. By stating that witches and magicians were simply good performers who did occasionally break the law by cheating their audiences. Stott angered England's religious and government leaders, men who actually did believe in witches. King James I was especially upset. He seemed to think that there were witches everywhere, and he wanted them killed. Stott's book made the king's pursuit of witches look silly. Outraged, King James and his soldiers gathered up every book copy of the Discovery of Witchcraft they could find. Then they burned them. The witch hunts continued. Fortunately, a few of Stott's books survived the fires. Nearly 100 years later, after King James had died, bookmakers printed new versions of the Discovery of Witchcraft. These copies, with their description of how tricks were performed, were purchased by a curious generation of would-be magicians in the late 1600s. Because witch hunts were over by that time, with a few exceptions, the art of performing magic gained newfound popularity. People throughout Europe had, especially in Britain, began to recreate the tricks that only 100 years earlier might have gotten those people burned at the stake. Other magic books were soon published, many of them using short descriptions of the secret behind the tricks. Magicians started appearing at public gatherings and festivals, in town squares and on street corners. Crowds welcomed the magicians and even cheered them on. Their tricks were entertaining, not threatening. No one confused these performers with witches. Gradually, more people realized science could be explained. Things that had long been mysterious. They had they began to doubt that magicians controlled the powers of nature or were friends of the devil. They became they came to believe science could help them understand the world. In fact, for a while, early scientists were the new magicians. These magician scientists were called alchemists. Unlike modern scientists who seek to find answers to why nature works the way it does, alchemists were concerned with the opposite, explaining nature and then changing the way it worked. Many of them tried to turn ordinary metal like lead into gold, something that would make them and the people they worked for rich beyond belief. Alchemists would concocted potions they hoped would allow them to live forever, or at least stay young for a very long time. As alchemists attempted to achieve these goals, all the while entertaining kings and queens with their bubbling potions and smoky spectacles, they conducted hundreds and thousands of scientific experiments. They knew that they had to understand the way the world worked in order to change it, but they had much to learn. For instance, alchemists didn't know that gold and lead were made from different atoms, so there was no way to turn one into the other. Such knowledge would have saved them the time and trouble of trying to do the impossible. Yet, in the process of their experiment, and often by accident, these early scientists began to unravel the secrets of nature. They learned a great deal about chemistry, chemical reactions, and how different substances work together. This led a huge advances in the manufacture of porcelain, metal, and glass. Their notes and experiments established a foundation for future generations of scientists. Just as important, the alchemists proved that the world was not such a mysterious place after all. By the 1700s, the idea of being able to control nature with magic was almost completely gone. There were still places, including America, where people believe in witches, but advances in science had taken the fear factor out of magic. In an age of science and reason, people knew that magic was not real. Magic continued to be popular, but it had not changed significantly in hundreds of years. The tricks were the same ones that had been around since the time of the ancient Egyptians. The setting wasn't much improved either, with the exception of the few magicians lucky enough to perform in grand castle halls and stages for kings and queens. The tricks remained small no matter where people saw them, because magicians generally performed outdoors and traveled from town to town. Many relied on sleight of hand tricks, and others that could be performed with very little preparation and just a few common objects, cups and balls with regular parts of their eggs, as were cut tricks, swallowing, fire eating, and making small animal appear and disappear. The magicians would set up quickly, perform for an audience, hope to collect a few coins from onlookers, and then move on. They were street performers much like those who can be found in every big city today. As an art form, magic was not impressive. People would just as soon stop on the street to see a musical group or an acrobat as they would a magician. Magic on the street lacked a sense of majesty and mystery. If someone wanted majesty and mystery, in other words, a big show, they went to the theater or the opera. It took someone quite unusual to begin the process of making magic into a big show. That someone was a man named Matthias Buchinger, and he was about as unusual a man as he ever lived. Buchinger was born in Germany on June 3, 1674. It seemed unlikely that he would ever be a famous magician. He was born with no hands and no legs. As an adult, he was only 29 inches tall, and yet Buchinger learned how to paint and write using the ends of his arms. He also became a master craftsman, building musical instruments that he taught himself how to play. But he was most famous for being able to perform magic. He was a master of traps and balls, card tricks, and making birds appear seemingly out of nowhere. His skills as an artist, a musician, and a magician made him popular with royal families and audiences throughout Europe in the early 1700s. Buchinger performed in Germany for many years before traveling to England, where he amazed Britain's King George. He then went to Ireland and liked it so much he decided to live there. He performed stage shows regularly in cities around Ireland, attracting large crowds who stared in disbelief at how talented this tiny man was. Buchinger's physical challenges and travel schedule did not keep him from having an intriguing personal life. He was married at least 3 times had and may have as many as 15 children. His ability to perform tricks that most people with all their fingers could not do won Buchinger praise across European continent. His shows were held on stages and people paid money to see him perform his tricks, although not much different from those performed by other magicians, were all the more impressive because of his handicap and his amazing skill. Buchinger's unusual appearances certainly had much to do with his popularity, but the fact that he is remembered for his magical prowess shows how talented he was as a performer. He had proved magic could be a big show that could attract big crowds, and he became famous for establishing the stage as a new venue for magicians. By the mid 1700s, magicians found themselves competing with scientists for attention. Science was new to people, and it was almost as mysterious as magic. Mas- Microscopes revealed that the world was made of unseen organisms. Chemistry showed how different elements in nature performed everything from water to blood. Astronomy proved that there were other planets beyond our own and that those planets circled the sun. Physics demonstrate the forces that resulted in floods and volcanoes. It was an exciting time of discovery. Public science demonstrations, such as a chemical reaction that resulted in flashes of bright colors and smoke, or projectors that showed skin cells under a microscope, were popular with audiences. People were amazed at the variety of things scientists were discovering, and they loved seeing them. Yet science and magic seem to be the complete opposite of each other. Science is all about uncovering mysteries and explaining how the universe works, Magic is about keeping secrets and making people believe in the things that aren't real. Once scientists were able to explain many of the workings of the natural world, and people understood how many magic tricks worked, it was harder to fool people than it had been in the past. For instance, everyone knew that a person wrapped in heavy chains and locked in water tank could not survive. Everyone knew that a man could not catch a speeding bullet with his teeth. Everyone or swallow an entire sword. Everyone knew that a man couldn't take a head off a bird and then reattach it to make the bird just like new. Everyone knew these things were impossible, so magicians had to work harder than ever to make people believe that such things could be done, and that was when the magic became really interesting. Trick number 2, Sleight of Hand. Nearly everyone interested in magic begins with sleight of hand tricks. Even the famous magician Houdini started by doing sleight of hand tricks, which were popular in sideshows. These were simple illusions or card and coin tricks. A very easy one is levitating a simple object like a fork. Take the fork and hold it in your right fist. Make sure to hold it vertically. Have your clenched fingers face away from the audience so it is seeing backwards of your hand. Grab your right hand with your left hand around the wrist. Wrap your left hand fingers on and thumb around your right wrist, except for your left index finger. Slide that into your closed right fist so it's holding the fork against your palm. Now open your right fist slowly, giving the impression that the fork a bit of a widow with the index finger of your left hand. When your fist is completely uncurled, it will look like the fork is floating on its own. The trick is aided by a great show of struggling or trying to force power from one hand to another. It is important to remember that good magician doesn't just know how to do a trick. A good magician knows how to perform it so well that the audience believes it.